Hello and welcome to Living Stones, a podcast of conversations with the people of Red Mountain Community Church, highlighting the victories and struggles, the snapshots and stories of the people sitting right next to you on Sunday morning. I'm Peter Franson from Spirit Blade Productions, where we reject all applicants with the last name Augiri. Jake, you get that legally changed. I'll see what I can do. I'm also your fellow seat warmer at Red Mountain Community Church. My co-host today is Preston Hancock, our executive pastor, or as I once gratefully thought of him, the only other geek on staff at this church of jocks.
That's an 8.
Oh my gosh. It's balanced out quite a bit since I was on staff. Now we've got a nice balance of jocks and at least artistic people, if not like out and out nerds.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd go artistic, yes.
But I do remember fondly our nights. For a good run there, we were getting together on Friday nights to watch Farscape at my place.
I remember.
We didn't finish the series out. I do have the Blu-rays if you ever want to finish that
Okay,
show.
good to know.
And then you, as you alluded to with your Scottish accent, helped me out with some of my weird, nerdy audio dramas. So I'm curious, since we haven't talked about like anything sci-fi or fantasy in a while, what's the last sci-fi or fantasy thing that you enjoyed of any kind?
Yeah, the Avengers movies.
Okay.
Yeah, that Endgame, I think that's the last.
No spoilers. We're not talking spoilers.
No, the Endgame has nothing to do with how it turns out. Just to get that out there. They were just fun. It was good to see, the intricacy of how they wove in a lot of the previous stories and, just created a fun, watchable movie.
Yeah, I really like those too. I tend to like superhero movies that are more serious, and so I haven't connected with all the Marvel movies. But some of the ones that, like the Spider-Man Homecoming, was nice character-driven, even though it was funny and light.
Yep.
And I found that like Infinity War, right? And then Endgame were definitely my cup of tea.
Yeah.
It's pretty dark.
Yeah,
and serious.
death was involved.
Yeah.
So,
That's right. Okay, so you are the executive pastor. What do you even do?
That is an excellent question.
Are you like the pastor of dirty work, or are you like the...
I'm the pastor who executes.
Are you like the hitman?
Basically.
It's like, so when Kyle says...
Technically, I'm not allowed to talk about it.
It's like Kyle calls you up and he's like, Jeff Davis's giving has been down, and we've given him warnings, but his time is up.
It's time. Go! It's go time!
Make it happen.
It's my job to kind of make sure that things get done. So both Kyle and I are also elders, so we sit on the elder board. So I hear all that. Kyle and I process, how do we want to move forward? What do we need to do? Elders say yes, and then it's my job to help Kyle implement.
Okay.
So overseeing the staff and kind of day-to-day, just being a point person. If people need to know where do I go to find out that information, I usually have a lot of useless trivia in my head, and I can say, talk to this person for that or that person for this.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Nice. Well, so what's the... I want to know first the most fun or natural part of your job, and then I want the hardest or most challenging part. So the first, fun or natural, like that fits your wiring or whatever, or that you just enjoy the most about your job.
Well, I think I like the variety of what I do that fits me well, so that it's not just one thing. I'm not just constantly sending emails. I'm not just constantly doing tasks. I think it's the people side is what I enjoy most.
Okay.
It's just sitting down and talking with pastors and people in the congregation going, hey, I have this idea. What about this? What if we did that? Here's how we're doing it at Red Mountain. Could we make it better? And just having those conversations. I love that. The hardest part of what I have to do, I think, is when you hear an awesome vision that you'd love to pursue, but it conflicts with 2 or 3 other visions you're already agreeing to, or that already are existing. And so you hate saying no to that, but you can't say yes to that without it impacting something else.
Yeah.
So that's hard to negotiate. And then just a sense, okay, Spirit, is there an element of that we can keep? But it's just a lot. That's kind of the more rough part.
Yeah, that's all too much to think about. I don't think I would like your job very much. I'm glad you have it. Glad you've been doing it so faithfully. How long have you been in that position for?
I've been since 2006, so 13 years.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you must be doing something right.
I'm staying out of trouble. I'm staying out of the target zone. So $50 gets you pretty good.
That's right. Okay, so getting back to nerdy stuff while I have you here, what fantasy or sci-fi property would you like to see made into a good movie or TV show? Because you can always say like, well, I'd love this, but it would be terrible, you know. So a sci-fi property that is not, or a fantasy property, like a book or something like that.
Could it be something that's already been done, but you didn't think was done that well?
Sure, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Okay. Ready Player One.
Oh, yeah. Man, calling out Spielberg.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I didn't like the adaptation. I think it went too much. It deviated from the story a little bit. Well, which they all do, you know, in any kind of book or something like that. Ender's Game would be another one.
Okay.
Where it just made a bad movie, and the book was so much better. So those would be two.
I really heard that about Ready Player One from people that had read the book, that like it just really diverted in some really significant ways that they felt hurt the experience for them from the book. Yeah,
it just ended up being a different story. So in the end, you know, you can appreciate it. It's just a different story.
Okay.
But yeah.
I think I would go with, have you heard of, you've heard of Brent Weeks, right?
Yes.
The Night Angel trilogy?
Yes.
This is I was going to say a Christian author. He is a Christian and he's an author, but he does not write specifically for Christian audiences.
Okay.
He writes very dark fantasy about a world where like this is a dark world. But he's a Christian, and when I read his books, I was like, you know, there was like F-bombs and really dark stuff happening in his world. So I was like wondering, you know, usually you're not going to hear that or see that kind of material coming from a Christian, but page after page as I was reading, I was like, this guy is paralleling all kinds of stuff in the Bible. He's virtually quoting Psalms. This character is paralleling the life of Jesus. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in here that I'm just like, if this guy isn't a Christian, then for some bizarre reason, he really knows his Bible and likes what he's reading in it, you know? And I got in touch with him, and I actually interviewed him years ago on my podcast, like right before or just as he was really hitting it big. But since, as I mentioned earlier, I really like dark stuff, I would love to see Brent Weeks' Night Angel trilogy become a movie or something like that. Yeah, or a trilogy or that. Oh, that would be super cool. Speaking of things inappropriate for children, we spoke to some people who have children earlier today. We spent some time talking with Mike and Tanya Baker, who have been involved in fostering and adoption for a number of years, and they agreed to share some of those experiences with us. Here's that conversation now. Well, hello, Mike and Tanya. I looked at Tanya and said Mike, and now I'm looking at Mike, and now there's Tanya. Okay. Hi, and welcome to both of you guys. Thanks for doing this and going out on the skinny branches with us. Well, I first have to mention this. Like, I discovered over the last couple months that Tanya and I went to junior high and high school. Well, we went to the same one. I don't think we ever exchanged a single word in those 6 years, but I think it was just like a face that I'd seen enough in the halls that it kind of locked in. And you guys go to a different service than us, but I just like I was like, what? Who is this person? I know them from somewhere. And we figured this out just recently. So that was very interesting for me. And now this is like kind of gratifying for me. It's like, oh, now I get to hear a little bit about your story and what you guys are, what you've been up to. And you guys we're going to talk about fostering and adopting. That's something that has been a major part of your life. But I want to go back and start with how long have you guys been married? Do you remember?
Do you remember?
We've been married almost 18 years. It'll be 18 next month.
Okay.
Now, did he get that right, Tanya?
He got that right.
Okay. It's now official.
It was the one question I was prepping for.
Yeah, that's right. Now we're ready.
Now you just have to name the ages of all your children. Can you do that? Never mind. I'm not going to ask you that. I have two. I can't do it.
Reverse order.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So how did you each initially come to faith in Jesus? Was that something that happened before you were married or after? Or
I actually don't remember a time when I didn't believe in Jesus. I grew up in the church. My mom took me to church every Sunday. So I don't even remember like a certain moment or anything. I've just always had the privilege of knowing Jesus and just knowing that faith.
Okay. And what was your experience, Mike?
Same for me.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So we grew up, we always went to non-denominational churches growing up. I think my parents were were raised Catholic, Lutheran, and so. But yeah, we grew up in it. And before we met at church. We met at one down the road here. So
Okay.
at like the young adult service. So that's kind of where it all started. So she likes telling that story too. So
Is there some like interesting juicy tidbit there?
well, because I like kind of scammed her phone number so I could call her and
What?
Okay.
so
Okay, now we got to
Yep.
put it out on the table.
And then he pretended that he was calling to get an RSVP for some church event and happened to ask me to go to the movies. And I said yes. And
So how did you scam the number?
my roommates that I had, at that time he was like in charge of like organizing like the young adults like events,
Okay.
And so he's like, hey, why don't you call her? So
For the ministry.
Yeah.
Said
Yeah.
quotation marks.
Well,
Yes. Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
so
That's crazy. How did that read to you? Did that read to you as like sweet or a little psychotic or creepy?
well, it took me a couple weeks to even figure out we were dating. And now I just have a good story.
Nice. Okay, so did you each have separately an interest in fostering and adoption, or did that come at some point after you were married? Or tell me kind of how your interest in that developed or came about.
I mean, my parents, they did foster care. There's 4 of us, 4 boys. And so they did it whenever we were younger. And then my aunt, she ended up doing foster care and adopting a bunch. I imagine for me that had some kind of impact.
Sure.
But it was always something that we felt led to do, like there wasn't really a lot of negotiating or anything like that. It was just something we wanted to do.
Was that the same for you, Tanya, or did he kind of introduce you to and introduce that potential for your life?
I've just always had a heart for kids. From a young age, I wanted to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to adopt. And then when we met, I think it was just mutual that we decided that that's how we were going to build our family. That's how we were going to start our family, is through foster care and just trying to reach those kids that needed us.
Now, Preston,
Yeah.
you have some experience in
Yes.
fostering and adoption. Tell me, just give me a rundown of that and who you have fostered and adopted, and
Okay.
And then also what kind of triggered that initial thought for you.
Yeah, for us, honestly, that was Toby.
Okay.
Not that I was against it, but it wasn't on my radar as much. I was just like, hey, we'll have our own kids. We'll just do this. And she always, before we were married, she wanted to adopt. That was a big part of her. And so at the time, I was like, well, we moved here, and I was like, well, I'm in seminary. I'm working full time and got seminary full time. So when I'm done with seminary, and then I went on like the 10-year plan to graduate from seminary. So she was patient, but like as we're nearing the end, 2 years out, hey, you said that you would foster. Yep, when I graduate, it's still 2 years out. Hey, next year when you graduate, and then by that spring, I was graduating in May. By that April, we were taking the foster care classes. So as soon as I graduated, we were ready to go, and we were going. So we fostered 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys, one of which we adopted.
Okay.
Yeah, Josiah. And so it was great. It was a marvelous experience. I owe her big time for that. And now we both just kind of share that, and it's something we're very passionate about.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Mike and Tanya, give me the rundown of like how many natural children you guys have and how many fostered or adopted kids you guys have right now.
Right now, we have our 2 oldest. They are both adopted, 3 biological daughters, and then we have 1 foster son.
Okay. So then what was kind of like the order that your children arrived in?
So Jonathan, he's 15 now, but he was just 4 weeks old when we got him. And then the very next day, we got his brother, Kyler, and Kyler was 3 months old. So Kyler's technically, our birth order's kind of screwy, but he's technically the older one, but he was also number 2.
But he joined the family. Yeah. So you
but
started
the very next day.
You started with adoption and fostering.
Yeah.
Okay.
So were they fostering? Were you fostering at that
We were,
time? Okay.
Okay.
As soon as we got our license came through, they had called Tanya, like,
Yeah, the phone call
right there.
comes. Yeah.
And then they called her again the next day, and we went and they brought Jonathan to us. Then we went and picked up Kyler. So Kyler was at another home that they thought, because they thought maybe he was substance exposed, that he was going to have some type of issues. So,
Okay.
but it turns out everything was fine.
Okay,
So,
great.
And then Tanya had our three girls. So, and they're,
And those are all biological?
yep.
Okay.
Yep. And those are 12, 10, and 5.
Okay. And there was no fostering and adopting between those. It was bing, bang, boom.
We have, over the last 15 years, opened and closed our license. We seem to like to take the classes over and over and do the inspections over
'Cause
and
they're
over.
so much fun.
I know.
Yeah,
It's
they're
no
great.
work at all.
No.
So we've, I think, opened and closed at least 3 times now. So we've fostered, throughout a little bit. Done respite care, so foster families who go on vacation. We've watched their foster children and tried to help out in that way. And then, a little over a year ago, we reopened our license and have had 3 placements since then.
Okay. So you brought up like this, there's some kind of process or some kind of like examination that walk me through some of like what the logistical and practical challenges have been of fostering or adopting.
Well, you start off with a whole bunch of classes that you
Okay.
sit through. Now I think some of it's online. When we did it, we just had to go through the classes.
Is these like once a week things?
Yeah.
That go for about how many weeks?
When we did it was 10 weeks. Now I think it's 5 weeks in class, 5 weeks online.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure. There's an inspection of your home, so you have a checklist of everything that you need to have for safety's sake. Lots of interviews, lots of paperwork.
Yeah, they go through and they interview you. So they'd interview me, they'd interview Toby, then they interviewed each of our kids. Because it's such a family impact. So
Your
bring
bio kids or the kids you were considering
the
fostering?
bio kids,
Okay.
because they'll ask them. So, what's your dad like as a dad? Yeah. The heat's on. So it's a good thing $50 gets you what $50 gets you. No, they'll sit there and just ask them because they're entrusting a child to you.
Sure.
And so parents. Sadly, some parents will say things in order to get the child,
Yeah.
because there's often a subsidy involved.
Yeah.
And so some people, sadly, will do it for the money. So they have to interview the children and try their best to figure out, is this family a suitable family to take in the child?
Wow.
And that can be an involved process.
Now, I don't want to like put you on the spot with giving your answers to the questions, but I'm curious. Do you remember what kinds of questions they're asking? Like, do you have any narcotics in the home, or
They might.
I don't know if they ask about that. The one thing they would ask, like, if like firearms, that's something they'll ask about, and they'll want to, if you do have them, where's all that stuff at?
Okay.
A lot of it's more background check. They want to know your financial. You got to like give them all your financial information. Things. Make sure you have the right insurance, things like that. But during the interview, the questions that they ask you, shoot, I don't.
There's
really,
some
I don't
relational
recall.
ones, like what, I guess, what areas do you and your husband struggle with? What are your strengths as a couple? What are your strengths as a family? Weaknesses as a family? They'll ask the kids things like, what happens when you get in trouble? And your 4-year-old will say, you go to jail. So that sounds really great.
Thanks.
Yes. But more questions like, it seems like they're prying. I know they're trying to get a big picture of your family and trying to figure out where foster care is going to fit in your dynamics that you have.
is there something that stands out to you as far as like the practical hoops or the system type things that you have to go through? Is there any one or more things that stand out as like, ugh, I really don't like that part of it?
I would say I don't like almost any of it. So
We like the children.
yeah. You have to like sometimes, to me, you got to look at the bigger picture and like overlook all this other stuff that they're, because it can be frustrating, all the different, having to do things to your house. Because the other side of that is, it's not a requirement for, in this case, parents to have that. Like They don't ask them for their insurance. They don't ask them for their financial information. They're not asking them for any of these things. You know, they're not worried about that you have a car that can transport all of them, you know. So that's the part I think that's...
The communication can be tricky too, like just getting information from the caseworker, somebody who's working with you. That can be, because they're managing huge numbers of caseloads.
Okay.
And they have all these forms that they have to check boxes in and make sure is going up. So sometimes you're answering the same question 3 or 4 different times for 3 or 4 different people. That can be frustrating.
Yeah. And it's hard. There's so many people involved in the life of these children that you have like a constant parade of people in and out of your home and making appointments for and making sure that each person's been out, you know, every month or every 3 months, whatever they're supposed to be out. So there's a lot of like calendar work you have to do trying to get all the visits in, and you're working with a lot of different people. So that can be challenging because everybody has their own schedules, their own method of communication, and trying to keep up with all of those things can get tricky, but you figure it out.
Yeah, you end up finding the way through.
Would you describe it as kind of merely being at the level of nuisance and like mild stress inducer, or is the technical logistic side of things like a real difficult trial that you have to depend on what's motivating you to really push you through that?
I think it depends. Like, it depends on who you're working with too. What is the case manager like? What is the personality like? For me, the system is harder to deal with than any child they could, you know, place in our home, because there are so many working pieces, and for the child, you're just trying to meet their needs, not the needs of 10 different people that are trying to keep up. What do you think?
I forgot the question.
It's about the system. Like, what level of difficulty is it? Like, is that a major thing you have to push yourself through, or is it more just a hassle that you work through?
You stated that so much better than I did, by the way.
I've been working for 5 minutes. Like, how could I phrase this? And then you might just lob me that softball. Might have to use that sentence.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I think the most, the trying thing, I think, is as like a foster parent, you don't have to go to the court. Things are usually court involved. And so you don't have to go, but we do go because we found that we get better information if we do attend. The court never addresses us. But we can still be spectators. So
spectators, I'm lost. Spectators for what's being decided or worked through in the court that you're going and attending and watching.
Well, so, you know, like for instance, we have one little guy now that they removed at birth. So then they'll schedule a court hearing right away, you know, I think within 30 days to decide, okay, what are they doing? What services do the parents need? What services does the child need, if any? And kind of get everything kind of, you know, working, say, okay, the goal is always to reunify the child to the parents. So the state dedicates a lot of resources to the parents to help them to be successful. And it's more of, you know, the delays that happen because maybe it's things that the state didn't do, the things that the parents aren't doing. You know, like right now we have Dominic. He was 3 days old when we got him, and now he's 10 months old, and they're still no closer to kind of decide. I mean, you could say a little bit, but it's still kind of up in the air as what's going to happen.
Yeah, so basically they either have a case plan that's moving towards reunification where the parents are stepping up and they're doing everything they need to do in order to provide a safe home for this child, or they change that to severance where they're severing parental rights, and then the future is made for the child. And I think what you're describing is sometimes that's just a gray zone that sits there for a while, and you don't know. So you're wondering, people may ask you, hey, so what's going on with your kiddo? And you just don't know. And so it's just kind of a day by day, I just keep doing what I'm doing. But that can be a frustrating gray zone to live in sometimes, just not knowing.
What's the longest, and I'm curious from your experience too, Preston, the longest kind of like limbo time you've been in where you're wondering what the fate of this child is going to be, whether that's, the aim is to get them back with the parents or whether the aim is for you to adopt them. What's the longest limbo period you've kind of been in?
For our boys, it was 2.5 years.
Wow.
We fostered them for 2.5 years. Every month the plan would change, or, it'd be going one way and then backtrack. And so it took 2.5 years to finally get that permanency for each of them. We've had the longest we had another placement was 9 months, and she ended up being reunified with her parents. So it really varies. I've heard people, they have foster children for 12 years. Some friends of ours just adopted after a 12-year long process. And then other times it's 6 months. So it can really vary.
Mm-hmm.
So the longest, you said 9 months was the longest you had a child that you did not adopt in the end.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And on that one was a little bit easier because we knew, like, the mom loved her child, and she felt like she was wronged, and and it had more to do with the father. There was some stuff going on there, so so she really loved her, and so we knew that she was going to go back. It was tough dealing with the mom, but and she was a sweet little girl. So,
Preston, how about for you? How did you have a long limbo period?
We did. What about like what you were saying, Tanya? We had one that was about 2 years, and just a little over.
And did that end in adoption?
That was Josiah.
Okay.
And then we had our first placement, a little girl. She went home, or she went to be with a family member within a few months.
Okay.
So that would have been the shortest. And then in there we had one that was 2.5 that ended up moving to another family who adopted him. And then another little girl who was like 6 months and a little bit. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I heard this already or not. Has anyone at this table sought adoption for a child that they were fostering and not been successful at?
I would have, but it wasn't an option. There was a little girl that we were really bonded with, but it was clear from the beginning. Her parents were, and it was right, her parents were doing everything they needed to do to get her back and to create a safe home. So that would have been one that we would have liked to have done. But
and you had her for how long?
I would actually be interested in hearing you guys on this, because in some sense you kind of guard your heart with those sort of thoughts until you have an idea of where it's going. At least that's what we tend to do. Toby and I, we might express desire. Oh, that'd be amazing if we could adopt, but we don't really allow ourselves to go there until we know that there's the possibility of adoption. How do you guys negotiate that? Do you just process that together? Do you make certain decisions of, we're not going to let our hearts go this far until? How do you guys deal with that?
I don't think we've really, it's definitely not like a discussion. We love the children, but we have either had children that we knew were going to go back because we saw the progress of the parents and the desire of the parents, or we've adopted them. Right now, we're kind of in that limbo. Like, we love the baby we have like our own. We love him like our own, but we don't know. And it is hard to know if you're supposed to guard your heart or not. But I think that that's the biggest hang up a lot of people have with foster care is, well, I don't know if I can go through the heartbreak. I don't know if I could do it. And when we take ourselves out of it and we just think like these children have never experienced love, they may have never experienced safety, like we can give them that. And I think we have to have our hearts in that place. Like what we have done is possibly change the whole trajectory of their life, even in a 6-month time in our home, just by showing them that safety. So I don't know.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
Oh, it's something, I mean, we were just talking about it yesterday, and it's always something that people will say, well, I don't know if I could do that. I'd be too attached, and they take him away. I'm like, well, my blunt answer is like, well, I didn't know it was all about you. You know what I mean? I didn't know it was about me. But I guess we'll deal with it as it happens. It's not going to stop us.
Now, to some extent, that actual desire would mean they'd actually make a great foster parent, because that's like you were saying, Tanya. That's what these kids need. They need to exercise the muscles of being attached to someone and bonded. Because I remember asking one of our caseworkers, because child came in our home and right away started calling me dad and started calling Toby mom, and you start going, is this okay? Are we like doing damage to this kid by allowing that? And their answer was no, because you're actually allowing them to express that level of bonding. So if they can do it with someone, they can do it with someone more permanent, on a more permanent basis. But if they can't, and that's what a lot of these kids face, then that they face a future of never being able to bond with anyone.
Wow. What, we've already kind of started going into this territory, but what are some of the real emotional challenges, either in the process of bringing a child into your home or after the child has settled into your home? What are some of the emotional challenges you've experienced?
Oh, there's a lot of emotions. Every day is a different emotion. When a new child comes into your home, you don't know what types of behaviors. You don't know how they're going to express the feelings, that they don't even know what they're feeling. And so you're trying to get to know this child really quick, and they're trying to get to know you. Most of our experiences with babies even when we had the baby that we currently have, we had another little girl that was 3, which was totally different for us. It was very eye-opening because she had her own ideas, and babies don't. And so we had to, try to learn what was going to work for her, what's going to calm her down, what are her triggers. And that can be emotionally and physically draining, not just for us. Our kids felt it. It was heavy. But at the same time, we have to remind ourselves and remind our kids who we're serving and why we're doing that. But there is a lot of emotions. Just between dealing with the system, those emotions that you have of frustration or, whatever you're feeling. And then you've got a child now that you're trying to show this compassion to, and they know how to push your buttons. They all do. So I think every moment was a little bit different as far as emotionally, dealing with it.
Yeah. How about you, Mike?
I don't know. There's been children that have come in our house where it's easy to love them, and there's been other ones where it's really hard. We had one, that the one Tanya was saying, her name's Alexis. She had a lot of issues that weren't, I don't think they ever diagnosed her, properly as far as what was going on. It was really hard to communicate with her. She didn't understand you. It was just, so, she would have fits. So it was really hard on everybody. So it was like one of the ones that it was when we were able to transition her into a home that could cater more to her special needs. It was a good thing. So
Yeah, and it's a real push-pull of emotion, isn't it? Because you're committed to her, and yet it's hard.
What comes to mind when you think about some of the support that you've experienced in fostering and adopting that's really been valuable to you guys?
Until we came to this church, we didn't really have any sort of support other than family.
Okay.
But no outside support, nobody that said, hey, we've been there too, or, we're walking that walk with you. When we came here, there's the foster support group that Preston and Toby, they lead. It is great to sit down with other people that can say things that you normally wouldn't say, but we all get it. We understand because we're doing that. We're walking that walk. But then just friends and members of the church that have done respite, like Preston took one of our fosters for a few days so we could take our family on vacation and just gave us that time. We have some other friends that are also foster families, and they've taken our little guy that we have so we could go to my sister's wedding, and just those moments and that little bit of help, or even just a meal delivered. We've been blessed by that too. it's been really great being part of this church and being able to just be with people who understand and support us.
Did you guys know about that? I didn't even know this ministry existed, Preston. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But did you guys?
I take personal
secret
offense.
group.
Was that something that drew you to Red Mountain, or you came to Red Mountain first and discovered that they had this thing going on?
Oh, I don't think it didn't draw us here.
Okay.
No, not at all. We didn't. Not till we were here for a little while.
Yeah, I don't know if we started it until after you guys were here.
Oh,
I think
okay.
just from a timing point of view. Yeah. Yeah, it's a life group that meets twice a month, and it's just like Tanya was describing. It's a safe place. Sometimes we bring some scripture and we wrestle with, what does it look like to deal with the emotions of these hard kids, and then how does Jesus love us? How do we step into that? Like, we in many ways can behave like the very children we're trying to care for. So how can we step into that? Even a lot of the kids we look after have sensory issues. And so one time we just went around the room and go, okay, what are those sensory things that drive you nuts? And somebody says, touching my feet. I hate it when people touch my feet. It drives me nuts. And somebody else, this crinkling noise or chewing with your mouth open. Hate that. So just little ways that we can connect with our kids and with the work of Jesus, how we do that. So I think we probably started that after you guys started coming.
Okay. So if someone came to you, Mike and Tanya, and was interested, a little, hesitant, or maybe they were interested in learning more about fostering or adopting, what would be like the first thing that you would recommend that they do to learn more?
Well, there's numerous agencies that you can go to that will help you get say license. But when we started years ago, we went to this orientation, and it kind of gave us a high level of this is what it's all about. This is what you have to do, and that's kind of where we started. And I believe those you could still find, number of those to go to.
Okay,
so,
that's just Google.
Yeah,
Google.
Yeah, I mean we've had friends. We have one friend that they just had 2 kids, and then they knew we played soccer with them at Central, and so when we'd hang out with them on occasion, and they would pick our brains about foster care, and they're like, what, we really are thinking about doing it, and so they end up getting into it, and they at the end now they've adopted 3, so which is kind of cool, we think. So I feel like we had a little part in that. So
what's speaking of just kind of experiencing that moment that is really gratifying. This wasn't in the list of questions, but what comes to mind is a moment or something that you experienced through fostering and adopting where you're like, this is why it's worth it.
Oh, that's a deep question. Every time we have a child come in our home, I think it's just like a prayer, how are we going to be used to, help this child or maybe this family? If it's reunification, you're supporting a family. But tell me the question again.
Oh, I would have written down, so I can't repeat it. No.
Okay.
No, I think it was something along the lines of just what's something really positive that you experienced during this process that is just that's really gratifying to you, that comes with the process of either fostering or adopting.
Well, it's cool. The little guy we have now, it's neat seeing our kids more of the girls just love on him, they just adore him. And then even other, we have other families like the Carters and all they have 6 kids, and they'll come over and they'll do the same thing to this little guy, and Mark and Sherry will do that too. So it's kind of neat seeing, I guess, for us that, at least for me. So
And just being able to love another child, but as a wife, seeing your husband love somebody else's child like their own, that is something so dear in my heart. Just when I watch him interact with the children that aren't ours in our home, and you just hold that so special, because that is a gift, being able to love somebody else's child.
Mm-hmm. So, husbands, you can win points with your wives
Yeah.
by considering this kind of ministry. Well, thanks so much, you guys. Preston, did you have anything that you wanted to cover, or?
No, I was just going to ask one quick follow-up. Have you guys ever had a child where, whether they had extreme behaviors or not, but you see them make that little bit of progress and you see them use their words that little bit, or you see, can you think of a time like that?
I mean, we see that a little bit with like our older ones. There's some, things I think that they've had to overcome, that a normal child wouldn't have to. So, there's also times where it's, it can be frustrating, but we try to like remind ourselves that, I can't think of the right words, but not to give up, really, and so sometimes we want to throw our hands up, but
But you love them.
yes.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming and just sharing some of your experience. Hopefully this has been helpful to someone who doesn't really know anything about this kind of life, because that really is a life that you're taking on, as opposed to different kinds of ministries that people could be involved in. This is really a whole life that you're taking on. So I appreciate you guys coming and sharing a little slice of your life with us.
Can I speak a little to like the spiritual side of all of the foster care
please.
idea?
Yeah.
Just for me, I think we've all been called. It's in the Word. We've been called to help those that need help. And I think a lot of people are like maybe sitting at home thinking that maybe this is something they want to do. And I just really want to just encourage people to like, for me, I pray like, oh God, break my heart for what breaks yours. And then you sit and you think about that. And if you are sitting there and you pray that prayer and you sit and you think about these kids that have no home, are not being shown love, are not being cared for, and your heart breaks, that's your calling to be able to do this. Like when you feel that heart break, some people's heart breaks for children, in another country, or groups of people who have never heard the gospel in another country, and they feel their heart break over that. That's how we feel when we think of foster care ministry, if you want to consider that. And so I'd encourage people to pray that and listen to what their heart says. And if your heart is breaking over these children, there's so many and such a need for foster homes, that might be, the Spirit leading you to maybe make a step in faith and just trust God to walk with you through that journey.
Cool. Thank you. I'm glad you shared that. Thank you both, really, for again coming out in the skinny branches and doing this weird podcasting thing. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, no, thanks.
Well, that was a cool conversation. It was a topic I didn't anticipate necessarily that would come up on the podcast, but I'm really glad that we talked with Mike and Tanya. What was something that stood out to you, Preston, from our conversation?
I think for me, what Mike and Tanya both described, I kind of followed up and described it as the push-pull of emotion. That because I've watched Mike and Tanya over the years, and they've obviously fostered longer than I've even known them. But this real sense of embracing the hard, of dealing with the children's behaviors who are coming from. Perhaps they were physically abused, perhaps they were just neglected, and so they crave all kinds of attention, or they're just trying to make sure that they're okay. You deal with those behaviors, but there's this real, genuine love and appreciation for these kids. And when you talk about the kids that they've fostered, a smile comes across their faces, even the ones that were hard. There's a genuine love and affection. And you think about the sacrificial love of Jesus, that no matter how we behave towards him, there is this real sense where he is constant, and he doesn't cover over in the sense of negating. Oh no, you didn't do anything wrong. Oh no, he looks full in the face of who we are and what we've done, and he loves us. And I've seen Mike and Tanya do that with these kids. That there is a sense in which you can name the hard. This is difficult. These behaviors are hard. And yet, at the same time, I have seen them and other foster families just love these kids to the point where they're passionate about caring for these kids, and these kids need it.
There must be an added appreciation for the character of God when you are involved in fostering and adopting, because we are, as Gentile believers, adopted into the family of God. And, I've already, just becoming a parent, I've, gotten some insight into, some things about the nature of God's character that I don't think I would have gotten if I hadn't been a father. But I can only imagine the added insight that must come from just experiencing what someone experiences when they're fostering and adopting. I really appreciated what Tanya brought up at the very end, in talking about how we are all called to do something. Scripture indicates that the church is meant to care for orphans and widows in their distress. And so we're all called to do something, but she, offered some thoughts on how we can sort through what our individual role could or should be as we consider that calling on all of us.
Yeah.
So I was really glad that she added that at the end. Speaking of children, one place you can find a bunch of them is at water parks. The poll segment.
Okay.
Here we go. The poll at rmcchurch.org/podcast. Question was, which Arizona water park is better, Big Surf or Sunsplash? Sunsplash was the winner. 60% preferred Sunsplash, while only 40% preferred Big Surf. Preston, what say you?
Well, I can speak from a position of total ignorance. I've never been to either.
Really?
Really. Yeah, it's one of those things that's been in the backyard, so you never visit those. You always travel and go see the other things.
Yep.
But I like the name Big Surf better, so I'm going to go with that.
Okay.
Just because it seems like it should be better.
Just going with
with purely marketing.
Yeah,
I'm going to be a sucker for marketing there.
How can a sun really splash you anyway?
I know. I get splashed with the sun. I want to get wet.
Yeah.
Give me a Big Surf.
Personally, I prefer the one without mucus and invisible fecal particles in the water. So till then, boys, I'm just going to turn on the sprinkler for you, okay?
There you
go. So they get that sorted out. All right, that's about it. Another one in the can. Jake and Dave did a great job last month, by the way. They killed it on the podcast, which is
nice.
Really a violent expression. They just beat it with ping pong paddles.
They dominated.
Until it stopped moving, and then they buried it in the dirt parking lot out. And so you watch for that mound next Sunday morning, the little mound in the dirt parking lot.
And that's
last month's episode. So devastating was their brilliance. Preston and I mean, we just do our best.
Yes, basically. We just get along.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get by.
All right. That's it for this episode of Living Stones. You can follow Red Mountain Community Church at MyRedMTN on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also go online to rmcchurch.org/podcast to submit responses to our poll questions and leave questions for the guests featured on the next show. On our next episode, we'll be talking with... Did I say tucking? That'd be weird if we tuck him in.
Yes,
I think there's
odd.
not going to be any sleeping in
yes,
here. Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to be talking with Chuck Broad, who's going to share about a lifetime serving God both locally and overseas. You can go to rmcchurch.org/podcast to submit your question for Chuck, and you may just hear it read on the next episode. In the meantime, I'm Peter Franson.
I'm Preston Hancock.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on Sunday. Welcome. No.
Hello and welcome.
That's right. Thank you. you got it, man.
That's where you need the shock mic, right there.
Right.